I saw Doc Pandia on Twitter a short time ago, and he'll be on this show in exactly an hour.
Okay.
Say that essentially the lower extremity injuries on the 49ers right now are of higher concern than the non-lower extremity. Let me translate. Trent Williams, ankle. Dre Greenlaw, hamstring. More concerning than Debo, shoulder. McCaffrey, oblique.
Okay.
So eyes on Williams and Greenlaw more so than the two offensive weapons.
They missed Dre Greenlaw a lot.
Big time.
On Sunday.
Big time.
With, I think it was 18 missed tackles they were credited with.
Worst game of the year as far as tackling by far.
Right. And that's where Dre Greenlaw comes in and hits very hard. He plays at full speed. He plays downhill, all the cliches you want. And he cleans up if the front doesn't do its job. So that's what they missed a lot on defense. So
we'll get a further update on that in an hour. Peter King is coming up in 15 minutes, actually even a little bit less. And he had all kinds of 49ers and Browns stuff in his Football Morning in America column. Big compliments to Jim Schwartz. Not so much to Jake Moody. And even had to fend off a couple of readers in terms of how much praise he had heaped on Brock Purdy. I defend him off a little bit. I read that and I'm like, I can
appreciate that.
I can relate.
Right? You totally
can, Peter. I just think it's funny. Look, everybody who wants to take victory laps or whatever, when you're right for a week, that's awesome.
Right.
I do think it's funny. And if you're one of these people, just put this in your back pocket. If you want to do the see I told you so thing this week, great. That's 15 good games and one bad one. So if you want to say that the characteristic of the player is what you've seen one time and ignore the other 15, rock out with your Brock out. Go ahead and do it. I think you're nuts. I don't think that's how it works. I watched Josh Allen only score 14. I watched Pat Mahomes only score 19. And I watched Brock Purdy score 17. That's what we watched. That's how it works. National Football League, really good defensive players coming at you every single week. That's why there are no unbeatens left already.
Yeah, and I like what you said earlier about sample size. If you're going to small sample him in terms of not believing that he's the real deal, you can't then small sample him and say, see, this is why he's no good when he's got all those games of being a good quarterback. And you mentioned 15, and 3 of those were in mop-up. So, I mean, in terms of
what's the actual number? I'm throwing a number out there. So there were 5 this year.
Right.
How many regular season last year if you give me the Dolphin
I'll
game?
give you the Dolphins. There were 6 last year.
Okay, so that's 11.
And then 2 playoff.
And then 2 playoff games, so 13.
Right.
Okay, so 13 good ones.
Yeah.
And then the injury in Philly.
I'll discard that because he was on pace to have a good one.
Okay. Yeah, he was 4 for 4.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other 3 games he played in, but he was 0-0-1.
Okay.
It was kneel down city. Against Kansas City, he came in garbage time, and he threw the ball 9 times when they were down by 3 scores.
If I'm Brock's agent, I'm going to walk in there and be like, okay, he plays well 13 out of every 14 games.
Right.
They'll be like, all right, there's $50 million.
So if
we'll
for
sign
a year,
us up for that.
And if you're going to small sample him in terms of disbelief of him being the real deal, then you can't look at the small sample and say, well, see, this proves that he's no good.
Yeah.
So that point that you made is a good one, and the first good one you've made in weeks.
Oh,
so that was a cheap shot. I had to sneak that in there.
Well,
yeah. It's a Roger Federer a backhanded compliment.
Save your cheap shots for tomorrow. That's what the summit is all about.
Oh, yeah.
Warrior Summit, Fieldwork Brewing Company, tomorrow, the whole gang from 4 to 6. It's free to you. Make sure you're there. Also, get on over to YouTube. We take cheap shots at one another every day, quite frankly, and all of you too. And then you do it at us, and it's a ton of fun. YouTube.com/957 The Game. Get all of your content there. Fun way to bring in the show. Let's go to Tom in Walnut Creek. Hi, Tom. What you doing? You on with Willie and Dibby?
Hey, guys. Favorite part of my show for listening to you guys every day. I just want to say one thing. For all of Cleveland's vaunted defense, we almost beat them short of a field goal with regards to how badly we played. So I'm not worried about Purdy. I think he's going to be fine. He's going to show up in Minnesota. And the Niners are fine. You know, Cleveland has no offense, and we still almost beat them. Let's take that for what it is. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Tom, thank you
Tom.
very much. Appreciate the call. I do feel this way sometimes about teams, and I think it's a good thing. Even go back to the Warriors, right? They went 73-9. How did you look at losses? You're like, well, something weird happened. Or even when they, in my opinion, the year they lost to the Raptors in the title, it's like, okay, did they get beat? Yes. Did some weird stuff happen? Uh-huh.
Not that weird. Just losing two Hall of Famers in back-to-back games.
Yeah,
That's
just
not
lost two
weird.
of your four best players. But anyway, like...
And still had a chance to win the series.
So go to this game and be like, all right, did anything weird happen? In other words, in order to get beat, do you need a series of uncharacteristics, or if you want to call them unlucky, unfortunate things need to take place in order for you to lose? I would argue yes. Like, I do think that was a game where just about everything that you worry about going wrong in a 49er football game largely did. Sure, you could have lost everyone. That's not what I'm getting at. But you go into a Niner game, you would think, okay, what's the scenario where they lose? Well, let's start with the other defense plays really, really well. You probably turn the ball over, and even though they won the turnover battle, they did. You would lose some players to injury, some key ones. They did. You'd have elements play a role. They did. And then you get all the way to the end of all of that, and you're still sitting there on the field lining up a 41-yard field goal to win the game, and then you miss that.
Right.
So it's not an excuse. It's just, I believe, for the Niners to get beat this year, at least by anyone other than the other two or three top-level teams.
Right.
Some weird stuff's going to have to go down, and sometimes it does.
Well, a lot of weird stuff happened to Cleveland, too, including the fact that their quarterback threw 2 picks, and he should have thrown a third, and their head coach designed a play inside the deep red zone that he should not have designed, and he had his quarterback throwing the football into double coverage after already throwing 2 picks when all you needed was a field goal. So you lost to a team that is, at best, middle of the pack. The defense is elite. Yeah. The offense is not very good. They don't have their best running back, Kareem Hunt, off a scrap heap, off a couch. And, Jerome Ford had a couple of big runs, and he had a big game. So Cleveland was better than you. And I know fluky things happened. You lost McCaffrey, you lost Debo, and Trent was largely limited for about half the ball game. But that's football, and that's going to happen. And you're right. You still had a chance to win it with a kick at the end. But Cleveland wasn't very good on their own side. They gave you plenty of chances to win that game.
Yeah. And I did not bring this up because I didn't want you to do laps around the room. But it was a fumble, and it wasn't called one. And the 49ers win the game if it's a fumble.
Yeah.
It's not to blame the refs. It's just... That is my point. I think the Niners are the best team.
Well, no. Of the fumble. You and Peter King, who will join us next.
That's fine. But my point is the 49ers, nobody needs me to tell them this. They have the best roster in the game. So I think they're the best team. And are they going to lose some football games? Yes. But in order for someone to beat them who's not called the Chiefs or the Eagles or the Bills or the Lions, what have you, we'll see what happens when those teams go toe-to-toe. But for someone else to beat the 49ers, some unfortunate things are going to have to take place in that game. And that will happen probably 2 or 3 times this year.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it works. This was one of those days.
It's a 17-game gauntlet, and to think that anybody's going 17-0 is foolish.
Well, this year it's factually incorrect.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in general, in most years, it's very much almost an impossibility. Patriots went 16-0. And couldn't close the deal and win the Super Bowl. When Minnesota went undefeated, they went 14-0. I'm sorry, when Miami did. I was thinking about Minnesota's 15-1. They went 15-1, and they lost in the playoffs. So to run the table, start to finish, even with one loss, is very, very difficult. So the Niners are going to have a couple more of these, at minimum, games where they probably should have won, but they don't.